All in Sports Network. We love sports.
The Kansas City Chiefs got a huge win yesterday versus the Las Vegas Raiders, but at what cost did the victory come? We're going to talk about it here today on the Chiefs Report. I'm Jace Andrews. We appreciate you tuning in. It's a brand new show here on the Rogue Media Sports Network, and we're going to keep you covered all season long, all year long on the Kansas City Chiefs. So with that being said, let's get right into today's show. We're going to talk about yesterday's victory. We're going to talk about the injury that came out today to a defensive tackle that I would consider a highly important player to this team. And we're also going to go through what are the options for replacing him, whether that be, in the actual building, or if we believe that it's time to go outside the building. If the Chiefs need to look at a trade, what that would look like, who's available, kind of all the intricacies of that. So let's start talking about yesterday's game. I think that's where we can start and kind of go with what we saw, why the offense finally woke up, and kind of everything in between. So first off, basic thoughts. The offense finally did what it was supposed to do. And if you look at the stats from this game, it is legitimately like sickening for Raiders fans, which is exactly what I want. I mean, you just kind of pop up these stats here and you can kind of see what exactly happened. The Raiders had 3 first downs throughout the entire game. 3 first downs. Now, 30 of those for the Chiefs. And I just find it so interesting because for the entire year, we look at the Chiefs, we see them, and the defense is something that has far outweighed the importance of the offense. When you have Patrick Mahomes, when you have the ability to do stuff that Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy, and this offense can do, the defense is the team that has to step up. It's the side of the ball that has to step up. And I love Steve Spagnuolo. I'll go with that. I love Steve Spagnuolo. I think that Coach Spags is a fantastic defensive coordinator. I think Brett Veach is a fantastic defensive GM for getting prospects, especially at the secondary level, and making them better. But the fact of the matter is, this was the first Chiefs shutout in literally over a decade. 2011 was the last time the Chiefs had a shutout at Arrowhead Stadium. So I really kind of see this as a turning point in the season for multiple reasons. And I think the first is obviously the confidence was there. We can see that Patrick Mahomes' personality starting to come back. If you haven't seen the play of if you watch the game, obviously, but when you look back at the game and see that the 4th and 1 and Patrick Mahomes doing the hard count, obviously we know what he said. This never effing works. This never effing works. And then he snaps the ball and Pacheco runs it for a yard and you get the first down. That's the Patrick Mahomes that I want to see. That's the Patrick Mahomes that I need to see for this Chiefs team to be successful. And I think in so many ways, you look at this and you really think about how the Chiefs can really grow from it. I think that's probably the best way to go about this. And so when we go back to the stats and kind of really kind of see what's going on with everything, you know that this defense got into a good spot. First of all, 95 total yards for the Raiders, 34 rather, for the Kansas City Chiefs, 31 points, 0 for the Las Vegas Raiders. But again, we saw Pop actually figure it out, 57 yards on 15 carries and a touchdown. Travis Kelce was the leading receiver, which is one thing that I actually would like to kind of fix a little bit in some aspects, but at the same time, that's just what it is, and we can kind of understand from there. But honestly, one thing that I think is so underrated about this team is their running backs and how they continue to find running backs and use them as a positive way. Brashard Smith, 14 carries, 39 yards. I know it's not going to pop off the stat sheet. I know it's not going to change the way we look at this team. But the fact of the matter is that Isaiah Pacheco has not had the year we had hoped. And Kareem Hunt is 50 years old, it feels like. So for the running back room to have Brashard Smith, for him to have an ability to come out here and play the right way, especially with injuries and everything that's happened this season, you like that. And not to mention, it wasn't just his running abilities. He had 5 receptions for 42 yards and an 8.4 average. That's what you want to see. It's what you need to see. And for so many reasons into this team, you have to have this offense moving at full pace. And we'll talk about why the defense is so important, why the defense is really the moving factor to this team. But ultimately, the offense has to perform to the level we expect as well. We have to kind of see this offense and understand that it's something to really take hold of. and pride yourself on. Really, really got to pride yourself on. Rashee Rice, back first game here with the Chiefs since his 6-game suspension. He did what we know Rashee Rice can do: 7 receptions and 42 yards. Overall, I think you got to give this performance from the Kansas City Chiefs an A+ for the reasons that I just listed. The defense looked fantastic. The offense, for so many reasons, finally came to life. And I think what became the biggest teaching point of all, the vibes were up. I mean, you look through this schedule, you look through the Kansas City Chiefs and the schedule they've had this year. Obviously, we know the Lions game last week was an interesting one, finished interestingly, but they didn't have a stranglehold on that game ever. That there wasn't a stranglehold on that game. I thought they had a stranglehold on the Jaguars. They really did. And then they blew the lead and they lost on the road. Not something you can do. The Ravens were the Ravens. Obviously, that was the game Lamar Jackson got hurt. And, there's so much stuff to talk about that. The Giants, I think that game was just an interesting one. 22-9 on Sunday Night Football was a weird one. You lose the first 2 games of the season. This was the first game where I legitimately looked at the Chiefs and thought, yeah, they could be a Super Bowl contender. They could. And I don't know whether I want to feel comfort in that, in the fact that the Chiefs finally looked that way and it's week 7, or if I want to take this in a positive light and know that at the end of the day, they're 4-3 in the division, which is definitely a tough one. You still have a lot of games against Denver and Los Angeles, and you've got another one against Vegas coming up at the end of the season. You're able to really turn this into a way to win this AFC West. Like you legitimately can. And while I think in so many years and so many ways that hasn't been a problem, this year you truly have to think about it. You do, because of what the Chargers are doing, what they're able to do and how they're able to come out here. And you're going to need to play, good against them when you see them again later on this season. You're going to have to play good against your 2 games against the Broncos that you have left. We saw what they were able to do. So this win is great. And I don't want to nullify over it, but at the end of the day, it's one win. It's one win that has to really embody this team. It has to propel this team in so many aspects. And it really has to make you understand that the Chiefs can do this. Now, in the same breath, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is the Raiders. The Raiders are one of the worst football teams in the NFL. Trey Tucker is their best receiver. Jacoby Myers was out this game. So was Brock Bowers, who has been out this game. You had Kenny Pickett, who came in and immediately fumbled the ball on the snap. I'm not saying that you can't take this win and be happy about it, but I think you got to take it with perspective. And you got to take it understanding that this is not a win to look at and say, we fixed ourselves. That's the goal, and you got to work off that. But next week, there's going to be a new team. And next week, you're going to have to face a better team. It doesn't get any easier than the Raiders. And I love saying that, but the Commanders are a good team. You're going to face them in prime time. And ultimately, you have to be ready. You have to be aware of them. And this Raiders game that, for better or for worse, can help you propel your team has to be taken that way. I do want to look at the defense real quick because we're going to kind of transition into them in just a moment, just specifically because of the injury to Norman-Lott, which we'll talk about in a second. But overall, defense was great. Chris Jones, I think there's been so much talk about him this season, his effort that he's been putting forth, his ability to go out on the field and actually act like he wants to be there, because we haven't really seen that. And you can go back to the play against the Jaguars, but you can go to a number of other plays where the effort just wasn't there. And that's okay if we can fix that, because that cannot be something that a leader is doing. And that's what he did in this type of thing. Got a sack. He went 2 tackles. Trent McDuffie looked great out there. Chris Rowland-Wallace did great. Noah Williams. Again, these cornerbacks are always great. Leo Chenal stepped up again, as he has been all year at that linebacker spot. One guy that I do want to see a little more of, that I just don't think we're getting enough of, and especially given the injury that we're going to talk about here in a second, is Charles Omenihu and a couple of defensive tackles, just because this defensive line, I feel like, can be so much better. I mean, you have Chris Jones, for goodness sake, and yet this defensive line is not in the place that I really think it can be. I mean, ultimately, if you go to pressure rate, if you go to all that stuff, the Chiefs aren't in the top of the league. They're merely Honestly, they're probably more in the bottom of the league. But I mean, just for instance, we'll just go to sacks alone and kind of look at where the Chiefs stand. They're in a position where it's not a top percentage. It's not that way. I mean, they're middle of the pack. They've got 15 sacks, which the most is Denver Broncos at 34. And I can kind of show you this, but they're middle of the pack. Ultimately, there's nothing like special about them. And this defensive line that has Chris Jones, it should be so much better. It really should be. And so that's just my opinion, and we can kind of see this win, take it as it is, and move on from there to make this hopefully a better situation. So let's go to the news of the day, though. Obviously, there's a lot of different things to kind of look at, but we did get some unfortunate news in terms of Omar Norman-Lott. He did, in fact, tear his ACL, as we can kind of really look at this from an outside perspective and see that this is a big loss. I mean, a second rounder in so many aspects. You can see that he was a big piece. He was, a second rounder this year. Tearing the ACL is hard. And I wish him the best. I wish everything with that the best. And when the injury happened, this is what you feared in so many aspects. This is what you almost didn't want to see and hear the next day. But Ian Rappaport does confirm it. So let's first look at Omar Norman-Lott and kind of why this is really in a lot of facets such a big deal. So if we can kind of go back here and look towards the stats for the Chiefs and overall what he brought to the team, you can tell that he was a big piece. And a second rounder, he was still growing. I think that's the bigger thing with this, is that it wasn't something that was like, oh, he was a big thing this year. Yeah, he wasn't, but he was a growing piece on this team. He was a growing piece. I mean, the past two games, he hadn't done much, but you look back to the previous game, or the first two games, he had the sack, had 3 tackles against the Giants, and ultimately there's a depth factor, especially on the defensive line, that in so many facets is used more than I would argue anywhere else. I mean, I'm just going to switch here to the depth chart. You can tell that this, when you have 4 down linemen, you need your defensive tackles to be in a good spot. And so now you have Derek Nottie, who is, I like him. I love him. I think he's been on this team for a while now, and has had his times. He cannot be out there alone, and so your options are a bit thin, because Felix Anudike Uzomah, the Kansas State days, he's a player that I just thought we'd see so much more. But either way, he's on IR, and so your defensive tackles are limited to Chris Jones, Derek Nottie, and now Ashton Gillette. I don't know what that looks like from a depth perspective in terms of how many snaps you get from each, but I can tell you that either way you slice it, from here on out, from here to the end of the season, those guys are going to be getting a heck of a lot of reps. Those guys are going to be getting reps that are going to add to the total, are going to really kind of, I would say, adjust this team in some aspects. So let's look at these aspects and kind of see, can Derek Nottie hold his own? He has been a good force for this team for a while back. I mean, he's been here since 2018, and he knows the formation well. Him and Coach Spags are very close, but is he a guy that can take all these snaps? Ultimately, I think not. And again, the stat sheet for some of these guys aren't doing great, which, now I think about, let's do this. Let's go to PFF and kind of work with that. I think that ultimately can help us decide what we can see from these defensive tackles. So first of all, when you look at Derek Nottie, you can kind of tell that he's going to need some time. I mean, he's a 6'1", 300 plus pounder. He's not going to be able to be out there every single snap. He's not going to be able to be out there and really kind of take over in a simple way. So I don't think he can be the end all be all to that defensive tackle position. That's step one when you look at it. Step number 2, how can you really look at this defensive line and in a way understand that it doesn't need help anymore because of the injuries you've had? The player grade for Derek Nottie is not great. A 30 PFF grade, 3 solo tackles, 4 assists. I mean, That's not something you can live with. It's not. And if you want to look at Mike Dana, then he can be an option, but he's also in a starting position. And you're looking at him and saying, okay, well, how's he doing? Also, not a good grade at PFF. Now, PFF isn't everything, and I understand that eye test can show different things, but in some ways, I feel like eye test is even more tough for these guys. And so that leads me to the point of saying that in this defensive tackle room, in this defensive line room, you're going to need more from Mike Dana. You're going to need more from George Karlaftis. You're going to need more from Chris Jones. And they're giving a lot. I'm not here to harp on their play and this point and all that stuff. I'm not here to do that. However, I am here to say that the Chiefs' defensive line has underperformed this year. It has. In a lot of aspects, I believe this defensive line should be upper echelon of the league when you have George Karlaftis and Chris Jones. And I think this defensive interior tackle room is in a good spot. Plus, as a football mind, I think the 4-3 works better than a 3-4. So having 4 down linemen should ultimately result in you getting more pressure to the quarterback and a lot more things around that. How exactly, though, do you keep this up? How exactly do you look to this team and almost give it a vote of confidence? Like, what can Brett Veach do? He can go out and make a trade, is what he can do. Like that I think that becomes the option here for the Chiefs, is to trade for a defensive lineman. Now, does that mean the defensive lineman is a defensive tackle? Yeah, it could mean. It could for sure. In my mind, though, I think it could be any defensive lineman because as you look at the Chiefs depth chart, we can tell that it's not exactly, depthful without Chris Jones or George Karlaftis. And so looking at the way that this team can go about basically fixing the defense. I'm not going to say fixing the defense because I guess that's not right, but making it to where this defense can be in a positive spot, then that's where I see this team being to a better spot. So what are some D linemen that the Chiefs could go out and get? First of all is Jalen Phillips. He's the guy at edge rusher from the Miami Dolphins. I think he would be a really good fit. I really do. But again, edge rusher is lesser on the totem pole in some aspects than what you would see in a defensive tier lineman, strictly because I said the depth and that ideal that you need to really work at that. So that's kind of where I see that changing is the depth role. So Jalen Phillips would be good. But at the same time, I think it's not something to look at and see. So Christian Wilkins is also an option. I think he could ultimately come in here and do a lot of good things. But in a lot of aspects, it's the defensive tackle that is going to be the one you have to look at. So Derek Nottie, obviously great there, but there seems like they're intrigued to go out and get a defensive lineman. That's what the Chiefs have been looking for. Diana Rossini wrote that, looked at it, and really kind of understands that they'll get it. So in a lot of aspects, what can the Chiefs do? How can they go out and find somebody? So that's where I want to kind of go into this article here and talk about it. So let's talk about what players make sense for them most. There's a defensive end and Jeremiah Johnson the second, and he's on the Jets. Obviously, it's going to be something that you look at and understand that defensive end is not going to be as good as an interior defensive lineman. That's step one. The second part of that is that I don't see him being an amazing addition. He missed most of last year with an Achilles tear, and I know he's done some good things now. I don't know if that's something to take a risk on. I know he's on a rookie deal. I know that there's some positive behind him. I know that Aaron Glenn is his coach and all that stuff, but it just doesn't seem like a perfect fit to me. And so that's where I have to go interior defensive lineman. There's Dramont Jones from Tennessee. He's an option because Jeffrey Simons is off the board, but Jones could be one that you could see 7 total pressures, 5 defensive stops on the season. And again, if Omar Lott is out for a period of time, which we now know he is. So apparently there's it's a similar skill set between the two, which is a good thing as well. I think in so many aspects, that's an underrated portion of these is having similar aspects, similar roles, similar characteristics. We know how Coach Spagnuolo goes about this Chiefs team. We know how he likes to kind of keep a similar aspect in there with how the Chiefs have really run since he's been the defensive coordinator. You go back to the days where L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie and how they had, their roles. And then we know the downplayment of Trent McDuffie since L'Jarius Sneed has gone and how he's had to kind of transition into a different type of role, if that makes any sense. So if that can all be done in that light, you have to think that Omar Norman-Lott, you want someone similar to him. You want someone that is going to be in a similar spot when all is said and done. So I really do think that is something to look at. But also, you can go back to a defensive tackle in Brian Brees. And this is the guy that I want to kind of spend the most time on because he, in my opinion, makes the most sense for a couple of different reasons. Brees was a first-round draft pick back in 2023. That should tell you enough about what the ideal is. But the Saints are going to be in a spot where his rookie deal is going to be done here in the next 2 years. They're going to be in a spot where they are not going to use him properly. They're going to be in a spot where they are not going to, maybe not going to extend him. And so it would come at a cost. It would come at a hefty price. But Brian Brees could be a very good addition to this team in a lot of ways. I have to let you kind of answer that in some ways, and I want to hear your opinion on this and ask, what is the defensive tackle that you need? What is a defensive lineman that you need? Like, is there somebody out there that the Chiefs need to go get? Because I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it for the first time in like 5-6 years. I really do believe the Chiefs, if they want to go back to the Super Bowl, they're going to need to add somebody at the trade deadline. And whether that is a defensive lineman, whether that is somebody on the offensive side in a running back position, which we know from reports from Diana Rossini that the Chiefs are now less than likely to go after a running back, and that they believe in kind of the guys they've been able to put up there. And obviously, we saw that this week as well. But a defensive lineman just seems like the most sense. It really does for a load of different reasons. Obviously, the injury is one of them, but the pressure rate is something to want more of. The fact that you have Chris Jones and George Karlaftis and expect more from your defensive line is definitely something to be there because, you like the secondary in a lot of aspects. Trent McDuffie has done the right things and your cornerbacks are in a good spot. You like your linebacker core, Drew Tranquil, Leo Chenal. But at the same time, you kind of take a step back and understand that this defense until today, or yesterday, I should say, had really underperformed. And now that's been a long-standing thing for the Chiefs. It's not something that like, oh, well, look, it's just popped up here. The Chiefs are underperforming at defense. Like, no, that's just something that we've always expected. And in so many years in past, I mean, you go back to the 2021 season where the Chiefs had an insane offense, but the defense just could not do anything. And it was constantly, I mean, even from night one in that season when 2021 season, but like 2020, I guess 3 season against the Lions, where they lost and the offense just looked bad. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling continued to drop balls. I mean, it's always been a defensive matter for the Chiefs. Even this year into the game against the Jaguars. I mean, ultimately, you should expect your offense to be able to work around when you're up by a certain amount of time, but the defense wasn't able to contain Trevor Lawrence. I mean, 31 points for a Jaguars team that I know they've been playing well. I know they have a good record. I don't see them as a top tier offense in the NFL. Is something to be alarmed about and something to watch out for and look at in so many different aspects. So do I like the way the Chiefs played this game? And do I like that they are in a position to make a trade? I do. But I really do feel like a defensive lineman is a necessity. It really is. And so kind of going back here to Brian Brees and really what he can do for this team, I think is a big thing for me because as a defensive tackle, he's been fantastic. 7 solo tackles. He's got 1.5 sacks, and he's on a defensive line that is not good in the grand scheme of things. Let's just put it that way. And so, can you add him here and in so many ways make him a focal point for your team? I think that could really change the way this outlook goes. I think Brian is a very good person to add in to the defensive tackles you have, specifically because he can play on the right or left side. And they always talk about defensive linemen as 1 tech, 2 tech, 3 tech. And basically what that means is kind of the body type you're going to have, the way you're going to attack the ball, the way you're going to attack the offensive lineman. So again, I might be misremembering some of the ways, but basically, one tech you're going to be a lot more of a bigger guy, not less mobile, but you're going to go for it. Two tech, you're kind of aimed in a different way, but you're going to be a lot more agile, a little more mobile, lot less weight, and kind of use your agility to it. And in a lot of ways, the Chiefs for a long time have had bigger guys in the defensive interior lineman, and we know from Chris Jones and kind of the way that this has gone, but I think in so many aspects, you look at Mike Dana, who could potentially come in and legitimately like play that part of the game and move into the defensive tackle position. I like it, but at the same time, then you're kind of putting yourself on an island for Ashton Gillette, who hasn't had a ton of time. I mean, he's a third round pick. You used a lot of picks on your defensive line. And so if you're able to, if you want Mike Dana to go inside, he can, and he's able to do so. But that's again why I look at the edge rushing unit, because maybe Jalen Phillips can be a good part of this to add with George Karlaftis. Maybe you can be able to do that, but you really need somebody to fill the role that we have seen with Omar Norman-Lott. So that's kind of all we got for you today. I want you to let me know kind of your thoughts. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put some comments and kind of tell me what's a defensive lineman that you'd like to see for this Kansas City Chiefs squad. Is there a defensive lineman that you think would be best suited for the Chiefs? Obviously, the injury stinks. Obviously, the injury is a blow to the organization and not just the team, but a whole organizational whole. Because it's almost as if that was the one position you couldn't have an injury at, because the depth just it really isn't there. And in so many aspects, you could say that, well, maybe you pop Jerry Tillery and put him in that backup spot, and you're able to have a way to kind of fix it internally. But I don't know. I struggle with this defense and specifically the defensive line, because if you can get pressure on the quarterback, it really helps out your secondary, it really helps out your defense, and it ultimately changes the way that you play this game. It really does. And so it's kind of the way I see it. It's kind of the way that we are looking at it now. And obviously, we can kind of keep watch on this. Trade rumors are going to come in. By the way, trade deadline is going to be November 4th in the NFL. So kind of be expecting to see the Chiefs make some moves for then or on that day. We're going to have some videos out throughout, obviously the next couple weeks on the trade deadline, what to expect, who are the options, and kind of fill you in on all that. But ultimately, they're going to have to make moves. They're going to have to make moves. And I really don't think anybody's disagreeing with that. But I think it's something to really come to mind with and understand that you have to make a move to do that. And it's hard because for the past 4 years, you've been able to make smaller moves and been fine. You've gotten, guys like a Minihue back at the right time. You've gotten guys to kind of be almost your own trade deadline acquisitions. But this year, it's not going to be that way. It's not. You got to fix it. So we'll have to see. But that is all we got for you here today on the Chiefs Report. Once again, obviously, first show, got a lot of plans, got a lot of stuff that we're going to be doing. So stick with us. We're going to be making a lot better, making a lot of new things. And obviously, each day we can make this a better and better show for you. So hopefully you enjoyed it. We appreciate you listening, watching, whatever platform you're on. And we'll see you next time here on the Chiefs Report. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Stick around wherever you're listening or watching.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.